Yo, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Did you want to cut your camera on, or what's up?
I suppose I can, yeah.
I want to see that beautiful beard. All right, like there's only one beard on stream right now. We need two.
Hey, man, it's not my fault.
Are you streaming tonight?
I am. I'm streaming right now.
Oh, awesome. What's up, LCTR people? What does that stand for?
Stands for lecture, like college lectures.
Oh, okay, fair enough. I'm gonna be honest with you. I didn't do any research on who you are because I figured, why, right? I was not in Twitch politics. Like I didn't watch Twitch as a viewer before I came into Twitch, like probably like 19 months ago. And then like you weren't really streaming that much, but I heard your name kind of bounced around a little bit. And then you kind of started streaming again. People were like, "Oh, you got to talk to this guy." And for whatever reason, like we haven't linked up. So I'm happy to meet. There's like,
yeah, man, I've been streaming politics on Twitch back since 2014, 2015, back when politics was banned in most channels. I was one of the only politics streamers.
Wow.
Damn.
That is a deep cut. And so like from what I understand, there's basically like three or four, maybe five conservatives in all of Twitch politics. And then there's me, right? Which is the hardcore libertarian anarchist. And then, everybody else is a leftist of some variety. And people are like, how have you not spoken to one of the few people that isn't a leftist in this space? And I was like, I don't know. We just haven't linked up. So I'm happy. I saw you do like a little, I don't know if it was a TikTok or YouTube short or just a thing you threw on Twitter, shitting on the Amnesty thing. It was like, dude, I have been shitting on these vaccines and these mandates and these mask mandates like the entire time I've been here. I chilled out on it a little bit because I didn't want my channel banned, in terms of like, it was a little bit more choosy with how I did it. I got rid of some of the infographics of data and things like that once the misinformation policy hit. But I saw that and I was like, based. Like, I would love to talk to a conservative about this and just to get to know the other audience.
Cool.
Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me and reaching out.
Yeah, of course. Like, why wouldn't I? Hold on, pause. I don't have a beautiful background. I'm just sitting here with this black background. You guys need to see the Shire behind me, right? Bags in. Oh, thank you for the follow.
Thank you.
By the way.
Yeah, you bet.
So, I guess.
See if I got my Twitch Prime. I'll give you my Twitch Prime too.
Hell yeah.
I don't know if I have it.
Why don't you tell my audience, in case they don't know who you are, like who you are, what you're about, what you kind of do? If you could.
Yeah.
And like, I guess I'll do the same.
I'm a Montanan through and through. Grew up in Montana. Went to law school because I was interested in politics. I've been practicing law for almost 10 years now. I do commercial litigation. Been into politics kind of my whole life, and lots of experience in politics, and that's what I studied. And studied abroad 3 times. Love international travel. That's kind of my thing. And started streaming on Twitch in like 2014, around that time, 2015, back in the golden age of Twitch. And yeah, I'm just kind of more of a traditional conservative through and through.
You're a tradcon? Are you like you go into your Hellenistic Greek Orthodox church every Saturday?
Nah, regular Protestant.
Okay, I mean, I had to ask, how tradcon on a scale of like I call myself a tradcon to I'm unironically a monarchist, like 1 to 10, like what would you say you are?
Dude, I honestly, I don't think it's a useful exercise to argue about definitions of words and labels. And we could debate all day long about what does liberal mean and who's a liberal and is this liberal or is that liberal and what's conservative, what's tradcon, what's neocon, what's an anarchist, what's a monarchist, what's a progressive, what's a leftist. It's like, that those are just words and labels. I prefer to talk about actual ideas and policies. And
look, 100% with you. I was just joking, but I do want to say that it's a little ironic that the supposed tradcon is worried about, whether or not he might subvert definitions.
Why?
I'm just joking.
All right, fair enough.
There you go. We won't. We'll just use symbols. We'll let everybody know what I'm about. Yeah. So I'm
Well, why
Scott.
don't you do
This
the
is my
same for me?
post.
For me and my audience, tell me, but like, what are your views and
Yeah.
what's your background?
For sure. So Mark and I are both anarcho-capitalists, which is to say we are anarchists, anti-state, right-wing anarchists, if you will. Extreme libertarians, or one might say actually based in libertarian philosophy of Rothbard and Hoppe and Mises and Austrian economic theory and argumentation ethics, etc. But it's very interesting because with this massive shift towards this Marcusian kind of like socialist state that the left has swung so far towards, and this kind of like anti-enlightenment philosophy that has gotten so promulgated so much more on the left, we tend to find ourselves aligning far more with kind of like traditional conservatives, constitutional conservatives, limited government, paleo-libertarian type individuals than we could ever possibly align with the left. It's like basically I'm a right winger until we start talking about cops. And so yeah, and I've kind of carved out a certain position as like a social issues ANCAP. My education in undergrad was, a double major in psych soc, and went to grad school for counseling. And most ANCAPs or hardcore libertarians, they get that way through economics. And while I did get an associate's degree in economics, I took 2 accounting classes and said never again. I'm changing my major. So I didn't come that way, the normal way. I used to be a socialist, like a pretty hardcore socialist. And so I've done a lot of like discussions on critical gender theory, about critical theory, talking against the philosophy of the left. A lot of talks with people like Deb Philman, and we did like panels with like Blair White and Buck Angel. I do a lot of trans anti-critical gender theory stuff. And so yeah, that's kind of what we've been doing. A lot of debates too. I'm a bit of a debate bro.
Nice. Well, that criticizing gender theory is not something that the radical left has decided that they want to allow free speech on. So you're taking quite a risk there on if you're criticizing critical gender theory on Twitch.
Yeah. We did a big panel with like Blair White, Buck Angel, Taftaj, Sinead from Gen Spec, Tulipar, who's a famous D-trans person, Shapeshifter, another famous D-trans person, and Chloe Cole. We did this big panel, and 2 minutes into the panel, they had already mass reported one of the panelists, Taftaj, to force us onto YouTube. And like, we're like 60 subs away from being monetized on YouTube. And we were right under, like, I think where we were like 110.
We hit triple digits.
Within 2 minutes, we were at 110, and then they were like, nope, and we had to move to the YouTube, and like we stayed at like 70, 80 views. I was like, you fuckers, but they can't come after us. I don't know what it is. There's some suit at moderation that just loves libertarians or something. I don't know. We've been mass reported a bunch of times and never gotten a strike. So, cheers.
No, I've it's amazing considering how many people have been banned on Twitch and for all the stuff they've been banned on. And then you've got me, who's maybe the most conservative person out there. And I've never even had a strike. Never even had a warning. I'm squeaky clean. But that's also because I read the rules and I don't talk about topics where they and I don't say things that they'll ban you for. And
it's pretty much the same thing.
My audience doesn't need to hear me talk too much about trans issues. They already know how I feel. I don't need to say it.
Fair enough. I mean, like, we all have our niche. It's kind of part and parcel of being in the entertainment industry, which we are in. As much as we have high-minded ideas of being like political philosophers or something, at the end of the day, we're both talking heads. That's what this space is. We're the middleman between the theorists and the normie that wants a little news analysis, wants some breakdown, wants some comedy, wants some fun, and then hopefully bring them to that reading of more theory. The individuals that actually like know what the fuck they're talking about, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's basically what we do. A lot of debates. I love debating.
So are you a full-time content creator, or do you have a day job?
Full time.
Oh, nice. Good for you.
I mean, we're not really making enough money. We're struggling, but you know, we want to put in that time, you know. So please.
No, that's the dream. Yeah, that's the dream. That's the dream.
Yeah, so I mean, we don't make a ton of money on Twitch, obviously. And soon we'll be making this on YouTube, but yeah, that is the dream.
Heck yeah.
So, did you just want to talk about vaccine stuff in general, or did you want to talk about politics, or is there any things that you wanted to talk to us about, like as like the only libertarians really in Twitch politics? I mean, there's a couple of like really small channels.
No, I mean, I think
no,
I mean, I think COVID policy is, and that Atlantic article, I think that's one of the most interesting things out there right now. And
yes.
I mean, frankly, libertarians, I mean, I agree with a lot of libertarians on a lot of issues. I can't stand big L libertarians because all they do is help Democrats and help Marxists get elected. But I don't know if you're a big L libertarian.
What do you mean by that?
Like, are you
a lot of different definitions for big L? Yeah, I'm a member of the Libertarian Party.
Oh, okay. So do you vote third party then? Like, do you actually?
Depends. So I will vote for anyone that I think can win, that I have a reasonable expectation will reduce the size and scope of the state. So if someone is a Republican,
so if you've got
and they're like a neocon, you're automatically never going to get my vote. I will vote Libertarian every single fucking time. I'm anti-war. Go fuck yourself.
Well, but if you're libertarian, if your vote is based on like somebody who you think can win, that would preclude you from ever voting for a big L libertarian.
Well, like I said, someone who can win, and right, like in order, like I will vote libertarian or protest vote or something else, right? I will vote. A lot of ANCAPs won't vote. They think that it's a system. I think it's a form of defensive violence.
Yeah, and personally, I think it's. I think it's wasting your vote, for lack of a better way to describe it, or actively helping Democrats. I think if you're actually supporting libertarian philosophy, I think that the correct or smart thing to do is what Ron Paul and Rand Paul have done, which is recognize that we have a system in the United States and it's a two-party system, and if you want to change the system, you have to work within the system. And Rand Paul have been very, very effective and very successful in making the Republican Party more libertarian. And I think that and so that's one of the big things I disagree with libertarians on that, and foreign policy a lot of the times and stuff like that.
I'll keep it simple.
Otherwise, I agree with libertarians.
So it doesn't become like a big debate, but like just as a brief counter, right? If I lived in Kentucky, yeah, I'd vote for Rand Paul, right? Like I would absolutely vote for Rand Paul. But if you wanted me to vote for Mitch McConnell, I would literally tell you to your face, go fuck yourself. I'm not voting for Mitch McConnell, right? So there's a difference there, right? And so the idea that I'm presumably need to vote for the lesser of two evils is still evil as far as I'm concerned. So unless you present to me that you're willing to reduce taxes, reduce regulation, and anti-war, then I'm giving my vote for evil and supporting said system so that we don't get worse evil.
Yeah, but nobody's perfect. Like you're suggesting that you'll only vote for somebody if they're perfect and they are 100% right and they never do anything wrong. There's nobody that's like that.
I had three things. I said you have to reduce regulations, reduce taxes, and you have to be anti-war. If you're those three things, you earn my vote. You don't get my vote by default because you're presumably better than the Democrats just because you belong to a party that is slightly less socialist than the Democrats.
Right. And so the upshot of that, the effect of that is you're actually helping bigger government people. You're actually helping the Democrats. That's the problem.
I think you're actually helping the Republican Party. Like look at New Hampshire, for example, right? New Hampshire arguably has is the most libertarian state in America, right? It's a free state project. It's where a bunch of people move. And so what has occurred when you look at the legislation, that even though libertarians don't own a single Senate or congressional seat in the state government of New Hampshire, the Republicans there have become overwhelmingly paleo-libertarian. They don't represent Republicans the way that like the rest of the country's Republicans. They were amazing in school in the way that they mandates on vaccines, a lot of like homeschooling programs, like all these things that are like kind of paleo-libertarian, right? Kind of between the two of us, traditional, constitutional, conservative kind of stuff. And the reason I would say is that people believe that the swelling of the LP is one that takes away from one party to the other. But the simple fact of the matter is that 40, 50%, depending on the election, of people that are eligible voters don't vote. And what's actually true is that the Libertarian Party pulls a majority of their votes from people that wouldn't have voted Republican or Democrat either way. And so I think what happens is it engages people in these ideas of freedom, limited government, more free market economics and things like that. And it allows the Republican Party to grow in strength so long as it becomes more libertarian and more constitutional conservative. So I would say it actually helps transform the Republican Party when we are engaged in fighting from principled positions in the LP.
Yeah, see, if you compare yourself to somebody that doesn't vote, then I don't think that really rebuts my point, because I would say the same thing about people that don't vote. I think that people that don't vote are also basically part of the problem, and they're not necessarily actively helping Democrats, but in the sense that they're not voting for a Republican, they're actually helping Democrats. So, but well, again, I mean,
to be fair, I'm an
issue.
Anarchist. So I think democracy in and of itself is a violation of human rights, and it's a tyranny.
Well, why don't you not vote? Because there's a lot of libertarians that say you shouldn't vote.
Because I think it's a form of defensive violence, right? Like I think the violence of the state exists. This power is being exerted over me, and so I can use whatever tool or weapon to fight back against that violence. And the only way that I'm willing to use that is if I'm actually effectively fighting against that violence, not compromising. So if I vote for a Republican that isn't anti-war or, is going to grow the size of the state, then that's just more power that a Democrat's going to use against me in the next election. I will only vote for someone as a form of defensive violence if that person is going to reduce the power of the state, is going to change government in such a way that it reduces the burden on my life. That's just fighting back. I'm not a pacifist. Right? I have no problem fighting back. But I think the system itself is inherently violent and authoritarian, but I have no choice in the matter whether or not the system is utilized against me. So I'll fight back against that system, but that doesn't mean I'm going to vote for the lesser of two evils and compromise with the system. I don't think the Republican Party earns my vote by default.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think we have an obligation to the country and to the citizens to do everything we can to try to preserve liberty, and that it means defeating Democrats. But again, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to. We can debate all night on.
Yeah, no,
voting.
That's fine. That's fine. I don't think you preserve liberty by having rhinos or anybody that I'm an anarchist, right?
Well, I mean, if you've got Democrats,
there,
if you've got Democrats that want to prevent you from getting health care because you don't have a vaccine, and you've got Democrats that want you locked up because of your political beliefs, and you've got Democrats that want to take all your money and tax all your money, and then you've got a Republican who doesn't want to do any of that, but they're not perfect on this libertarian issue, so I'm not going to vote for him. You end up with the Democrat in office, and now you've destroyed people's lives.
Maybe it works if I reverse this argument, which is an argument that I like to use against Democrats more often than conservatives, because it doesn't make sense for conservatives, but I think it really works. So when I talk to a lefty, a progressive, a Dem soc, basically everyone but a leftist anarchist that's anti-state, and I say, look, any power that you give the government, you have to recognize that power can be used against you. And so this is tailored towards the leftists. And I say, so imagine you vote for Bernie Sanders, right? Bernie Sanders promises to abolish private health insurance and create, Medicare for all, right? And you're all for that, and you love that. You think that's good, and you think that leads to favorable outcomes based upon your utilitarian calculus, right? What happens when a red wave comes and the Republicans now have control of this? Except the Republicans don't decide to bring back the free market Instead, the Republicans just decide to ban hormone replacement therapy in the United States. Well, now there's no private health insurance for adults even to get hormone replacement therapy, right? You have to recognize that you voted for that. That when you voted for Bernie Sanders and you gave the government power over your health care, you're responsible for the ways that Republicans use that power against the things that via their values that don't agree with yours. I would say the same of any conservative candidate. If they increase the power of the state, for example, Donald Trump, right? Donald Trump created the CISA, right? Which is a new branch of the Department of Homeland Security that is one of the big major players in censoring Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, right? And they have been saying that they're combating misinformation, disinformation. Donald Trump grew the power of the state and allowed the Department of Homeland Security, via that growth of power, to be utilized by people that were admittedly against Donald Trump, right? And especially under the Biden administration. That additional power is now being used to censor conservatives online because Donald Trump made the mistake of allowing that growth of that power.
I get that argument. It's just not convincing to me when we've got a binary choice in elections, and one of them is going to increase the power of the government by 100. The other one's going to increase the power of the government by 10. And so you don't do anything, or you vote for a third party, or you don't vote, or you do something, and the person that's going to increase it by 100 wins. And then now you've got a government that just got increased by 100 when you could have had a government increased by 10. Instead, there's obviously it's better to have the government only increased by 10 versus increased by 100. So that's again, that's not convincing to me, but I don't want to debate it all night.
Sure. Yeah, I don't want to debate it all night either. I understand the argument. I respect that as a valid argument. I just fundamentally disagree.
And I've just seen it happen.
You know what I mean?
The time.
Like, it's like I can either support the guy that wants to rape one baby or the guy that wants to rape 10 babies. And I'm sitting here saying I refuse to give you my support or power unless you're going to fight back against raping babies.
I mean, the answer to that obviously is like, maybe you should get involved at the precinct level in the GOP and make sure that the GOP is nominating people that you like. Like, we live in a two-party system. Like, I hate to break it to some folks. Like, I'm sorry, but we live in a two-party system. You're not going to change that. Libertarians don't get elected. Big L Libertarian Party members don't get elected in Montana. Like, if you're unhappy with the GOP's candidates, that's called working through the primary process. Go into the primary. Make sure you've got a good GOP person. I've just seen this a time and time again in these elections where it's a close election and the Democrat gets 45 and the Republican gets 44 and the Libertarian gets 5%. And you've got these 5% of people that voted for the Libertarian candidate, threw away their vote. Now we've got a Democrat that's a socialist, authoritarian tyrant, when we could have had somebody that is not a hardcore authoritarian, and these libertarians are voting, and these libertarians are doing nothing, of course, to actually fix the Republican Party. Like, I'm a Republican, I'm a Republican not because I agree 100% with everything that the Republican Party says. I'm a Republican because I want to be the one that gets to decide what it means to be a Republican. I want to be the one that gets to define what it means to be a Republican. And you do that by working through our two-party system. And if you're going to work outside the two-party system and vote for people that are never going to win, I just don't find that effective. But again, we're not. I brought that issue up because it's the one issue I disagree with libertarians on.
I'm with you.
That's the one issue I disagree with libertarians on. That's the reason I brought that up, and foreign policy. But
the numbers in the polls don't support that position, number one. And number two, it's not about tactics. It's about principles. And
I'm not talking about poll numbers. I'm talking about actual election results. And I can point to you U.S. Senate election results where the exact thing that I just described happened in Montana, U.S. Senate races in Montana, because we've actually got a strong Libertarian Party here, which is the other reason it's like a pet peeve of mine. But again, I only brought that up just because you asked me what I want to talk about.
I hope eventually they can get rid of the Republicans.
I agree with libertarians.
Or transform the Republican Party into being actually...
Yeah, because getting rid of Republicans is a pipe dream. That's never going to happen. We live in a two-party system.
Well, I mean, it's not like we haven't had new parties occur. It's not like political shifts haven't occurred in times of great strife, right? The Unionist Party, the People's Party.
Yeah, they were never successful, though.
The Democrats were pretty successful when they were created, as were the Republicans. We haven't always had Democrats and Republicans, right?
No, the Republican Party was created in 1860. The Democrats have been around. That party's been around since the beginning. But that was, I mean, if you look post-Civil War, it actually is Republicans and Democrats.
No, Martin Van Buren created the Democratic Party and put forward Andrew Jackson. That was the first Democrat candidate in the United States. Jackson. There's no Democrat ever.
So again, pre-Civil War though. Pre-Civil War. After post-Civil War, it's Democrats and Republicans. We live in a two-party system.
I'm not saying I'm wishing for it, but I feel another Civil War might be coming, so we could have another party switch, Come on. You got to have a Civil War to get a new party, you know what I mean? Like it's this
it's just I guess it bugs me because like I've seen Ron Paul and Rand Paul, real good libertarians, be very effective at working to make the Republican Party better, and these libertarians, small L libertarians, oftentimes agree 90% with what conservative Republicans agree with. And so I see this as a huge opportunity for the libertarians to actually have a beneficial impact and do positive good. And it's just I just look at it and it just seems to be all of that being wasted. And then we get Democrats.
I'll close
winning.
with this. I think the numbers and the data show that the Libertarian Party is doing a great job of that, and that even if I wanted the Libertarian Party to be the party that won, which isn't necessarily I don't really care what letter you have by your name. I just care whether or not you use the power of the government. But I think all of the facts really are beginning to show that what the Libertarians are actually doing is engaging new voters and turning the Republican Party to be more paleo-libertarian and more constitutional conservative because of the very fear that you're showing now. And I'm not saying you're terrified or you're scared. I'm just saying the mindset that we don't want the Libertarians to spoil us. We have to reach out to these people and bring them into our party because they're spoiling our vote, which in turn I think forces the GOP to put forward more libertarian-like candidates, and I think that's a good thing for everybody.
Of course, that would be libertarians working within the party system. I'm all for that. Again, I'm all for Ron Paul and Rand Paul. I'm a huge supporter of Rand Paul. I love Rand Paul, but he's not voting. He's not voting third party in elections.
My favorite thing about Rand Paul is that he wrote the Breonna Taylor bill, and then Black Lives Matter activists attack him and his wife screaming, "Say her name." And it's dog, he wrote the bill. What do you mean, say her name? Automatically assume because he's got an R next to his name that he's for no-knock warrants and a giant police state and fascism or something. And it's dude, he's literally the one that wrote that. It's the Democrats that wouldn't support it. Go talk to your own fucking people.
No, for sure. That I've talked about that a lot. Because what that shows is it shows that these leftists, they're not actually genuinely concerned about those types of things. And frankly, the Republicans and conservative Republicans are oftentimes very strong on civil rights, Fourth Amendment protections. In fact, the Republican Party of Montana has recently put forward a bunch of laws and ballot referendums to make electronic information subject to a warrant requirement. And Republicans are, and this is an issue sort of over militarization of police and violations of the Fourth Amendment and all of those things. Those are issues that conservatives and leftists should be able to agree on. But your story is exactly right. That just goes to show you that on an issue where we actually could make progress and we actually could agree on some things, Democrats just demonize anybody on the right. And it's you guys are insane. You guys obviously don't really care about this issue. You're just using this issue as a political prop to try to, get Democrat votes. If you actually cared about this, you'd be working.
Obviously, I would say the Republicans do the same shit. Right? I mean, how long have how long has the GOP party platform said that they were going to audit the Fed? They've had control of all three branches of government 3 separate times since they've had that on their party platform.
Well, yeah, but
because they're politicians, they're fucking liars.
Well, no, that's not why. The reason we get rhinos in the Republican Party and people like Paul Ryan, because there's a bunch of libertarians in this country that are not working within the GOP to make the GOP better.
Or they are making the GOP.
It's all the libertarians' fault.
It's all the libertarians' fault. Those damn principled small government people not fighting to make sure the Republican Party
right.
has small government.
The reason we have rhinos is because libertarians.
Anarchy is order, government is civil war. But nevertheless, there is something that we do agree on, I think, hopefully, which is this Amnesty article by the Atlantic. I found this to be one of the most despicable pieces of journalism I've seen in the last.
Oh, absolutely. You know, and the title of if you actually just look at the title, you might think, oh, this is an interesting title, and the title's bad, but then you read the actual article and it is absolutely despicable. It's absolutely grotesque. I mean, going out there and saying that, oh, you know, these were just innocent mistakes. We were just trying to do what was best for everybody. And and by the way, it was actually the conservatives that were intentionally pushing disinfo. So, you know, on the left, we were just innocent trying to help people. It was people on the right that were pushing disinfo. It's just like, oh my word. And then saying that conservatives got COVID right based on just luck. We were just luck. And it's like, no, the article's, if the article really wanted to make progress, what it would have said is it would have come out and said, we screwed up, the Democrats screwed up, we let our authoritarian streak take over, we violated human rights, we took away people's civil liberties, we're sorry, we made a horrible mistake, the conservatives were right, and we're going to turn over a new leaf, and we're going to try to respect people's rights going forward. Then it's like, okay, cool, I forgive you guys. Let's move on. But that wasn't what it was.
Republicans were certainly willing to, hand wave and compromise in the beginning. And I think part of that problem is that, none of these politicians really stand on principle. There's very few. There's like people like Rand Paul, libertarians that stood on principle in the beginning. But it was very clear, you saw this in Florida. I think it was like 35 days after 15 days to slow the spread, where he was like, no, fuck you, I'm opening beaches. Right? Now, obviously, those 35 days were a mistake. Like, Ron DeSantis is an authoritarian that shut down his economy and fucked over his people. He just did it way, way, way less than Democrats did. At a time
Kristi Noem didn't, though. We did have Republican governors who got it right.
Yes. And ironically enough, Japan has the best COVID policy that anybody had. Like, weirdly enough.
Yeah, and Sweden had a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, Sweden was pretty good, but Japan, I think, probably had it best. And was it Montana? Was it who was it? Or was it Wyoming?
No, Kristi Noem, North Dakota. She's the only governor. She's the only governor that didn't do some kind of like shutdown, lockdown.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, it was probably pretty obvious in the Dakotas that like it wasn't going to be an issue. Like, where the fuck are you going to super spread? Is there anywhere in the Dakotas where 15 people gather together? You know what I mean? Like, it's not the same as like LA or New York or Miami.
Well,
right?
I mean, yeah, but you had Democrats and other Republicans shutting down rural areas all across the country.
Oh, for sure. I just meant to say that it was probably an easier position to take, but nevertheless, it was.
Well, sure, but it was harder. And it was harder for Ron DeSantis to do what he did. I mean, I think Ron DeSantis deserves a ton of credit.
And he's in a purple state, right? Like,
it's like
he's in
a big
norms.
city. Yeah, and there's a lot of big cities in Florida. It's one of the biggest states, and so it would have been nice if everybody was Kristi Noem and everybody understood from the very beginning, like most of us did, that lockdowns are bad. But I would say, instead of calling Ron DeSantis an authoritarian, I would call him a freedom fighter, because he was second on the list of terms of governors. Now, of course, he's not perfect, but nobody's perfect. Like, this idea that like, oh my gosh, if you're not perfect, then you're authoritarian. It's like, I just don't think that's very productive to just go around calling everybody that's ever made a mistake an authoritarian. It's like when you've got actual authoritarians who are consistently 100% authoritarian, openly pushing authoritarian policy, openly defending it and arguing for authoritarianism. And then you've got one guy who like reluctantly like recommended people not go to work for a couple of weeks, and then from then on out got it 100% right and focus, and you're going to attack him as an authoritarian. To me, that just sounds a little bit short-sighted.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, obviously there are some people that are less authoritarian. I mean, I think the label is appropriate. But nevertheless, yeah, like he's one of the better ones, without a doubt. I wouldn't knock that in any way, shape, or form. I think he also had intense media scrutiny, right? Intense political pressure in a way that like Nome really didn't, right? Like all of the media attention was on Florida. Like, how dare Florida open their beaches? How dare Florida kill grandma, right? I mean, like all of this, and and he stood up against that media attention, and and I give him props for that. But I mean,
right?
I'm gonna be an anarchist. I'm not gonna not be an anarchist. I'm not gonna fight for my values, which is the eventual dissolution of the state, and freedom and prosperity. Well, I would say liberty. Freedom is kind of a choice, but the thing that was so wild about it when it comes to this is about that article was the omissions. I think were some of the more daunting things. It was a very interesting straw man that they set up, right? Because it was like, well, what conservatives may have been right about was, maybe we shouldn't have taken kids out of school the whole time. And maybe cloth masks mandates weren't great for hiking trails. And it was like, right. Or maybe you shouldn't have choked people out in Australia and put them in internment camps. Maybe you shouldn't have been so authoritarian that people were setting themselves on fire in protest of these things. Maybe you shouldn't have used OSHA regulations to circumnavigate the presumed constitution, the piece of paper that says, how our government is supposed to be run, that is supposedly this sacred thing that puts all of these barriers. Maybe you shouldn't have circumnavigated that to use OSHA and to get rid of the legislative process entirely to try and force companies and government employees vaccine mandates to where people couldn't get fucking jobs even after the lockdowns that you put in. There was no mention of lockdowns. There was no mention of vaccine mandates. There was no mention of politicians and their threats. There was no mention of the current lies that are being spread and promulgated. And there's some other things that are currently going on. The big one that I am really upset about that nobody is talking about is the real reason why the CDC voted 15-0 unanimously to use the Pfizer and Moderna vaccine onto the ACIP child vaccine schedule. And the real reason is Biden says COVID's over. It's no longer an emergency. They know that they're going to lose the immunity from lawsuit under the PrEP Act, their emergency use authorization. And so by getting it on the child vaccine, despite there being no science to support this at all, clinical trials are ongoing. It puts it in the vaccine injury compensation program, which gives them immunity and liability from lawsuit. And then all of a sudden they just say, well, I think we're going to quadruple. Oh no. No skis.
What happened?
Oh, I don't know. He must have dipped out or lost his internet or something. 2 weeks to flatten the curve, 100% safe, 100% effective. Is his chat still going?
Yeah, he's still on.
Oh, there we go. What happened?
It was really weird. It was like I got kicked off or something. I don't know. Like all of a sudden my Discord crashed and switched screens.
They came for you. They're finally coming for you. They're finally coming for you. They're coming for your channel. But yeah, just to finish up, right?
I agree with what you're saying. Yeah.
Immunity to these companies, so that they could make billions of dollars off of a state monopoly system that is the FDA, which I think is a genocidal organization.
Yeah, no, I totally disagree with putting that on the child vaccine thing.
Yeah, but it's just no mention of any of that shit. Like it's all just like, oh, we fucked up with the schools. You guys might have been kind of sort of right, but remember, it was for the wrong reasons.
Right. Well, and yeah, I agree with that. And they didn't include any of that. And then they also didn't mention the fact that it was actually it wasn't conservatives like being opposed to these things because we thought the science said this or the science said that, and we accidentally got it right. It's like, no, conservatives and a lot of other people were opposed to this stuff not because they were guessing on what science said on or would say on any of these things.
Right.
No, they were opposing it because of their principles and their values, and they recognize that taking away people's freedoms and liberties is not a good idea. And even if it was somehow making people safer, it still wasn't worth it. It never addressed any of the actual arguments head on.
Yeah,
it was
to be fair, as like I was addressing the science a lot. And I think we were certainly, the people that were going after the science were primarily the minority. I think you're correct. Like libertarians and conservatives
to me, I didn't care.
Principles.
To me, I didn't care if masks work. I was opposed to mask mandates. And again,
Yeah.
I said this at the time. I was like, I don't care if masks work or don't work. I'm against mask mandates because it's a violation of people's rights. And the government shouldn't be forcing people to do this. And it's like, so like, and the same with like vaccines, like I don't care whether or not vaccines work, quote unquote, or not. They still shouldn't be forced on people. They could be the most wonderful. And of course, the thing is that if these things, if masks and vaccines and stuff were as wonderful as they say, they wouldn't have to force it on people. They could simply explain it to people. Yeah,
the market.
Right.
If these things were effective, right? What did the market actually demand? Well, we have a great case study in what the market actually demanded, which was the gym in New Jersey early on in the pandemic, right? They closed their gym. They put in HEPA filter air filtration system, right? They instituted temperature checks at the door so that if you were running a fever, you weren't allowed in. And then, which I don't know how the fuck you do that at a gym, because the amount of people that are body temperatures increase from their pre-workout being kicked out would have been hilarious. But nevertheless, that's what the market demanded. The market demanded maybe in some places social distancing in restaurants, like every other table filled as opposed to every table filled. The market demanded probably some plexiglass. That's what the market demanded. Those were the market solutions that were coming about due to the pandemic itself. But instead, they issued the same problem that government always has, right? Which is the economic calculation problem. Is that you engage in central planning. You try and say that you know best when the market knows best, and you don't fucking know shit. And you try and control people's lives with authoritarian top-down measures. And then you just pretend like that's going to work, and you waste tax-paying dollars. And then on top of that, it was so much more egregious than what Democrats or Republicans even normally do, right? Like the normal, like, oh, sensible EPA regulation, sensible, tax structure to make sure that the nuclear power plant costs too much money to open. Like this shit is bad, right? Like this is bad. But these people were busing fucking sick patients into fucking nursing homes. These were murderers. And like, I'm supposed to forgive these people?
Right. Well, I mean, I forgive people even if they don't deserve it and if they don't ask forgiveness, but that's because of my own, personal religious beliefs. And that my problem with the article, and I tried to be kind of clear in this in my video.
I forgive people that pay restitution. Pay restitution.
Do you see? I forgive everybody, even if they deserve it or not, because I think that's better for my own health. Like, I don't think it's healthy for people to refuse to forgive people. Carrying around a grudge and resentment like that, it's not good for yourself. A lot of people have described it as like, drinking poison and expecting it to kill the other person. Like, I don't think it's
like carrying around
and
that
spiritually,
grudge is just fucking cortisol, stress levels for no fucking reason.
And so I think spiritually and sort of religiously, I believe in like forgiving people. But that doesn't, just because I'm willing to forgive somebody, that doesn't mean that like that article, had any sense of truth in it, or that article was not totally twisted, because it was still trying to mislead people, and it was almost like demanding, forgiveness without actually ever admitting or recognizing the problem, and the other thing is like, you can forgive somebody, but then not forget about it. Like, I'll forgive people that were in favor of trying to violate my rights during COVID, but I'm not going to like forget about.
I'm not going to give you amnesty.
Yeah, and then like continue to support you, or just let bygones be bygones. It's like, no, and the other problem is that they don't actually admit in that article what the real problem was, which was their own authoritarianism. They're not apologizing because they were authoritarians. No, they were apologizing because incidentally, as always happens, everything that the government was using to justify its authoritarian edicts was actually turned out to be incorrect, and that's what they were apologizing for. So we said that cloth masks outside work. We said the science worked. We're sorry that it didn't end up that way. It's like, no, you need to be apologizing for forcing masks on people. It doesn't matter what they said. That's what I would have preferred to see.
Yeah, well, see, the issue is that you're never going to get that from them. The reason you're never going to get that from them is the philosophical differences, right? You describe yourself as a Christian. I presume you're a deontologist. And right, like there are certain things that you believe God commands as morally wrong, right? They're just wrong. It doesn't matter what the outcomes are. It doesn't matter what the utilitarian calculus says, right? It's wrong to kill someone. That, right? Like obviously you can kill someone in self-defense, but to murder someone, right? But the left, you're dealing with, let's set aside the dialectic, right? Let's set aside the postmodern deconstructionism, critical theory, we'll set aside all of that and just deal with the consequentialism, right? Their entire moral framework is that they can justify actions morally or their authoritarianism morally based off of a presumption of outcomes. And then those outcomes turned out to not be good outcomes. They turned out to be bad outcomes. And so now they're saying, oh, we got the science wrong. The outcomes turned out to be bad. Therefore, we fucked up on these things because the outcomes were bad. Meanwhile, they're still living in the other problem with consequentialism is that it's a subjective analysis. You can't determine morality because you not only do you require perfect knowledge, but you have an order of values, and each individual values certain things above others. But they're living in a fantasy world where they think inflation is mostly due to Russia right now, as opposed to the fucking lockdowns. So they're not even looking at all the outcomes effectively, right? Like, why do we have inflation? Well, we have inflation because Trump and Biden, both signed off on trillions of dollars of fucking spending. Biden has obviously exacerbated the situation far worse than Trump did. And who knows if Trump didn't have a fucking CIA heart fucking gun to his head at that point towards the end of his fucking presidency. You know what I mean? Like his entire fucking people were lying to him and committing treason anyways. So I don't know if he even could, like, if he didn't sign those things, would he have been like thrown in prison for, some bullshit? Who fucking knows? But nevertheless, he went along with it. And then Biden just kind of like took that snowball so much further. It's like, we're not in inflation because Ukraine is the breadbasket of the world, right? It's a breadbasket of Europe. It does affect our economy, sure. The gas and the sanctions, by the way, the sanctions we chose to implement are there. Also, if we want to do some utilitarian calculus, I'm pretty sure Russia wouldn't have invaded Ukraine if Trump was still president. I'll stand by that. But nevertheless, we're having these problems because of supply chain breakdowns from authoritarian measures and from kicking people out of their jobs, destroying the fucking economy. Like, there's a reason the number 2 cause of death currently in people aged 18 to 45 is fentanyl overdoses. And a major reason for that are the lockdowns. You take away people's jobs, you take away their purpose, you take away fathers' ability to feed their families, and you put them in that dark and depressing landscape where a lot of people turn to drugs. And
absolutely,
drugs.
Yeah.
None of that.
No question.
None of those admissions are there.
Right. No, for sure. No, it was the article was really pretty shallow in a lot of ways. I mean, that's why, like, in that video I posted, I was kind of like, I commented like the headline is one thing. Well, the reason I thought it was interesting because the headline itself went viral, right? Like everybody had tweeted out that headline and tweets were huge with that headline, but nobody actually had like read the article. And it was like, after you read the article, it was like, this is the most like skin deep, shallow. Yeah. It's so much worse than just the headline. Like, again, like if you're going to call for a pandemic amnesty, I'm fine with that if you actually admit that you were an authoritarian scumbag and you were evil and you're never going to do it again. And of course, maybe the reason is that everybody else knew, that everybody else just knew without even reading the article, that it wasn't going to be an admission of all these horrible things.
It was the Atlantic, right? Like we weren't.
Right.
It wasn't like it was like Washington Post. Sometimes Washington Post like gets it kind of right. They're never fully right? But like sometimes Washington Post will, or like The Intercept, or believe it or not, BuzzFeed News, right? Like there are certain publications that occasionally a journalist gets it right, and you see the Atlantic, and nobody that gets it right is allowed to work there.
Right.
Like so maybe.
No, well, the other
part
thing
of
is, you could. I mean, I guess it also depends on what you mean by amnesty, right? Because like, an amnesty to me means like, okay, you forgive somebody, but I guess actually technically it means that they're not going to be held liable for what they did, and whether, and I guess in politics that means you're not going to be thrown out of office. I mean, I don't believe, even if they actually admitted that they were completely wrong and admitted they did these horrible things and promised to never do it again, I don't think that's enough to like, okay, now I'm not going to throw you out of office, or I'll continue to support you. I just kind of think that's an important distinction about what actually does you mean by amnesty. I think, like I said, I forgive everybody whether they ask for it or whether they deserve it for my own spiritual well-being. But like an amnesty, like, is, in terms of a political issue, I would never support that for these people, because anybody that did that, and frankly, I deal with this, or like I think about this with like the Russiagate thing too, and saying that Trump colluded with Russia. Like, I don't trust people that believed that Trump colluded with Russia and that went around and said that Trump colluded with Russia. And it's the same with these COVID lockdowns. I think that everybody that supported these COVID lockdowns and all of that stuff, like, they should never be trusted again. I don't understand, I don't understand how these like leftist, like Twitch streamers even, how do they still have an audience when they were so wrong on the #1 story for 2 years? The Trump colluding with Russia was the #1 most important story for 2 years in this country. And if you're a political commentator and you got that so wrong, why should anybody trust you or believe you now? And COVID lockdowns were a test. I think they were a real test, of people, and anybody that, frankly, we ought to all go back and look, and anybody that supported those COVID lockdowns, why would anybody listen to what their opinion is about whatever the new issue is today, some new issue,
Well, I would say that the left is, so this is where I would bring in the dialectic, right? I think that really is just your answer. It's the dialectic. That's why they maintain that trust. It really is that simple, I think. Right? I mean, you have a group of people, unfortunately conservatives, I would use air quotes, right? People that vote Republican, many of them have become consequentialist, right, in their philosophical framework as they've lost Christianity, which I think is a step backwards, because, you see a lot of like Republican type people, or people that call themselves conservative, that are really just kind of like, well, these things are justifiable because it leads to a better society. That's not the right answer. The right answer is these things are wrong because they're wrong, right? Like it's not about what the outcomes are. I don't care what the outcomes are. Certain things are wrong, and I don't care about your mathematics. But I would say that the dialectic being like when you look at somebody like Hassan or Vosh or somebody like that, like their audience is fully wrapped up in different variations of the dialectic, Marxist materialist dialectics, or just the kind of like modern kind of government status, like Hegelian dialectics, or Marcusean, all of the different instantiations. The idea that you can maintain contradictions because the world is full of contradictions and paradoxes, and that everything is subjective, and therefore there's no objective means of right and wrong, and that there's no understanding of the world, and that we all have like an imperfect lens, and so it's okay to have contradictions, and that really what's important is understanding institutional systems of power, and that we need to reorganize and restructure, analyze, analyze and then synthesize, the power dynamics into a new structure, it forgives any of those falsities. It forgives any of those things because it was all part of a process of contradictions that was, where your mind was in the right place to go against these evil conservatives that are really just fascists, right? Like, and that is really where these people are at. So they don't care that those people were wrong, because what they really care about, I think, is the process of analyzing and synthesizing institutions and power structures against their political enemy. And so all of these things are justifiable. We're just having trip ups. We're having little mistakes, and those little mistakes will correct, and we'll get higher and higher to the God state, the Marcusian kind of God state that's perfect as we, just retool the instruments and, learn empirically from the data, the more correct, better authoritarian position. So yeah, I don't think the left cares about trust. I think they care about the process, and they care about them as a vessel of the philosophy of that process. Whereas conservatives are more individualist and deontological, and they care about, do you look to be a moral person? Because they tend to be virtue ethicists or deontologists. Do you seem to be trustworthy? Do you seem to be right? Do you seem to stand by your values and principles? And when you go against those, then you as an individual, I can't trust what it is that you put forward.
Yeah, that kind of makes me think and wonder, were they really, did the Atlantic put out that article to try to help Democrats win the 2022 midterms? I would kind of think that it might, because like, did they put out that article to try to get people to read it, and then they think, hey, this is a good idea. Yeah, even though I disagreed with Democrats and their lockdowns, like, this is a good, yeah, I should forgive them, and okay, I'll vote Democrat. But then,
it was
I don't think that many people.
I think it's an inoculation from. So, I have this pyramidal structure of leftist philosophy that I kind of refer to. It's like the pinned tweet on my Twitter, right? With the Marcusians at the top, the intelligentsia and like academia and things like that underneath them, the vanguard kind of underneath them, and at the bottom of the pyramid are the useful idiots, right? All of these terms I'm intentionally taking from Marxism and other critical theory stuff. I'm taking their own names and using them against them. But at the bottom of the pyramid, you have the useful idiots, right? You have the Overton window has shifted. I want to be normal, standard Democrat that kind of, goes along to get along, right? That 10 years ago, if you asked them, is it okay to take your 2-year-old to a drag show, would have said, what the fuck is wrong with you? No. Now they're like, it's all about love and acceptance. And, right? Like, they're just going along to get along. And I think what happens is, and this is usually, looking at it demographically, hashtag not all, in most elections, this is usually white suburban women, right? This is the group that is the most important to the electorate, is white suburban women. Because these are the people that aren't really tied to any political party. They don't really care, and they kind of just go along with where the culture currently is, right? I think the left realizes that they're losing white suburban women.
That's a little bit sexist, but okay.
I mean, it's just factual, right?
I'm kidding. I'm joking.
I don't give a fuck. Call me a sexist. I don't care.
No, I said there was a poll that showed that like white suburban women like had a 20-point swing to the Republicans since August.
Yeah.
Like in August, like right
after fucking kids. That's why. It's the mama bears.
Right.
It's Moms for Liberty.
Totally.
They saw what was going on in the schools, and they don't understand it, obviously. Like, they don't fucking understand psychus and national standards, sex education standards, and they don't understand the complexity of like the, bell hooks and Stefanik and Delgado, but they know that you're fucking with their kids, right? And that you're doing fucked up shit to their kids. And that's it. That's all it takes. You start fucking with mom's kids. And so I think they know that they're losing that group. And that as they lose that group, they're hearing conservatives and libertarians being like, these lockdowns were fucking horrible. And so what they needed was an excuse. That's all it was arming that group of people with an excuse, so when they're attacked on all these things, be like, yeah, we were wrong on some of the science, but we were following the science. We're the
right, and we were trying to do right, yeah,
right.
And then
that's all they needed. Arm them with that, and then they won't be convinced.
The horrible thing is that Amnesty, or that article in the Atlantic about Amnesty, it was literally itself was pushing information claiming that Donald Trump told people to inject bleach, which Trump never said and never did. And so it was just so rich.
Did it, and I'm pretty sure she was trying to murder her husband.
Right. And nobody ever thought that. And anybody that saw Donald Trump's press conference where he talked about that issue, nobody would have thought that. And so, like, here's the Atlantic saying, oh, I'm so sorry that, you know, we got some things wrong and stuff, but it was really the Republicans that were pushing disinformation and blah, blah. And it's like that article in and of itself was pushing lies and disinformation.
Well, it's like, let's do a quick little timeline of like the major things that libertarians and conservatives were not off of principles, but off of the science, right? So,
that's a lot of that too. Absolutely.
Right. December. It was Republicans and libertarians that were buying masks and saying, dude, there's a fucking virus going around and this might be bad. And they told us we were crazy, that we were making shit up, that we were insane for buying and stockpiling food and getting masks, and that this was all crazy. And Nancy Pelosi told us to go to Chinatown, right? And called Trump a xenophobe, right? And then all of a sudden,
that's right.
We were right. Right, we were right that a pandemic was coming. So what was the next one? Well, the next one in the timeline is, hey, these masks don't really seem to be working. It's a social placebo, quote unquote, Dr. Anthony Fauci. Switzerland is saying the same thing, that, yeah, N95 respirators work, but like dirty fucking masks that you hang from your rear view mirror that causes a placebo effect that causes a psychological effect that makes you touch surfaces more often, makes you not socially distance as often, makes you not wash your hands as often, might actually increase the spread of the virus. And
hey, they got a mask on. They can do whatever they want.
The left still hasn't gotten rid of this. Even when the CDC told doctors they don't need to wear masks unless they're in a room with a patient with COVID, massive amounts of fucking doctors were like, how dare you? Why? Because it's become a symbol of who's in the cult. Who's in the in group?
Totally, yeah. Absolutely.
What was the next one? Right, that one's still not gone away and we're right on. What was the next one? Hey guys, isn't it kind of weird that the Wuhan Institute of Virology has published research with North Chapel Hill about doing bat vaccines? Isn't it kind of fucking weird that they were experimenting with the original SARS virus and that they were adding HIV protein sections to the virus to make it bond to humanized mice, hybridized humanized mice, so that they could create a vaccine? Isn't that weird that just happens to be right next to the Wuhan Institute of Virology where that comes from? Isn't it weird that India has a study showing those same HIV protein structures are within SARS-CoV-2 alpha variant? Oh, you're crazy. Lab leak theory is crazy. Ban. Get rid of you. Oh, what do you know? We're fucking right on that. And we were right about that change. And they still won't admit that NIH was, went to the state to try and get this funding done one way and had to go to a different group to have this funding done. Let's not talk about Event 201, right? Like, let's not talk about any of that shit. But so then it was like, hey guys, we're working on a vaccine. Clinical trials don't seem that great. Something seems fishy with the numbers that they're putting forward. Oh, we later find out that Pfizer had corruption in one of their 4 places where they were doing clinical trials. And so we can't even trust the original clinical trials. But we were right about that. Oh, then the next thing was, and it goes on and on and on. It goes on with myocarditis. It goes on with women. It goes on with prostates for men. Like, spike protein issues. It's happening today with, Paxlovid and the vaccinated. It's happening today with subclinical myocarditis. And the fact that nearly all of people that get the vaccine have some level of heart damage, that it's most likely incredibly small, minuscule, irrelevant, but who fucking knows what happens when you get 6 jabs, right?
Yeah, but
we were right about the science.
Okay, I agree with that, but I will say this: your average. No, your average conservative or average libertarian is not some like hardcore scientist that's like reading clinical trials and analyzing clinical trials. Like most people got that, most conservatives and libertarians and people on the right got that stuff right, not because we're like scientific geniuses and we're like we're better at science than they are. It's like no, it was basic. You could have no knowledge about science, and if you understand human nature and government systems and political history and everything, you could have gotten all those things. You could have gotten all those things right without any scientific knowledge. And so, what people were presented with was, and this is what 90% of people deal with when it comes to science, is you've got scientists saying one thing and you got scientists saying another thing, and that's what you've got with man-made global warming and everything else. And it's like, you know, the average American, the average person, like, I don't think it's their obligation to become scientific geniuses and answer all these scientific questions. No, but you do have to be able to listen to scientists on both sides of an issue, think critically about it, and come to your own conclusion. And I think with a lot of those issues, it was just people using common sense and critical thinking as opposed to like really deep dive. Like most Americans didn't do deep dives into like clinical trial data.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like I was one of the few people that was doing that, and like debating people, and they were like in the Twitch space, and they were like, "You're insane," and like I was one of the few people that was like, "Hey, you know, antibody-dependent enhancement is a fucking thing. Like this could be an issue," and you know, they changed the definition of a fucking vaccine. Now, technically, they didn't. Right. That is a bit of when people say that, they don't usually know what the fuck they're talking about. Which is to say, the definition of a vaccine has always been up to pharmaceutical companies, and so they can call a therapeutic whatever the fuck they want to call it, and then because they kind of present those things to the labeling of the FDA. But you know, a vaccine used to,
it was understood as immunization is what it was.
Exactly.
It made you immune. That's the point. It was literally called immunizations. That was another word for vaccine, and that was what they defined it as, providing an immunity. And
right,
it doesn't provide immunity.
That's another thing that they just failed to mention, right? Like, is
totally,
they're all now trying to memory hold this idea. We never told you that it would prevent the spread. What? We never told you that it would immunize you. What? Like, what are you talking about? Like 6 months ago, the CEO of Pfizer was still saying that. What the fuck are you talking about? So where's your apology for that? Like, they have so many things to apologize for.
Oh, for sure, absolutely.
And they addressed none of them.
You could almost never write an article that apologizes for everything the left did wrong in COVID because it's like unlimited. Think about how bad think about how like horrible they attacked people's integrity and morality because they didn't want to get the vaccine, saying that they wanted to kill grandma, and you know, saying that you're causing people to die and you're responsible for deaths. And it's like, actually no, that was all wrong. Like how horrible of a thing to actually accuse somebody of something so horrible as that and then to be wrong about it.
Well, I mean, and it's like and let's talk about the more culture warrior kind of aspects of this too. It was the left that was saying that COVID can't spread during a Black Lives Matter protest. Like,
right.
But we're anti-science. It can spread when 3%ers and Oath Keepers showed up in, was it Michigan, right, to protest the lockdowns. That's a super spreader event. But Black Lives Matter protesters, right. Yes, right. Those are super spreader events. But when leftists protest, it's not. It's just everyone here is wearing a mask while they burn down the city. So that's not actually a thing. You don't get to go to a funeral, and we're going to lock down your churches. But meanwhile, George Floyd gets 4 funerals and a golden casket. 4 funerals. Fuck off my green screen. He gets 4 funerals.
Speaking of that, isn't it interesting how year in and year out we have dozens of unarmed black men shot by police? And it's just weird that just one that happened to happen in 2020 at the height of a presidential campaign caused a bunch of outroar, and it didn't really, you know, the dozens of other police shootings of unarmed black men that didn't happen at the height of a presidential campaign, they didn't seem to get as much attention.
To be fair, it's usually less than 2 dozen per year. unarmed
Yeah,
black
it
men
is.
that are
It
shot
is.
and killed by police.
And I was careful. I was careful what I said there because I know that a lot of leftists like to think that it's like hundreds or thousands, and it is literally like 9 one year, like 12 the next. Like it's a small number.
Right. Yeah, look, as much as I really hate the state and cops, there's so many mythologies that are told by the left about police, right? My favorite one is like, oh, well, black people are killed more by police. It's like, that's not the truth. Like, you could win against conservatives if you just told the truth, right? The truth is that black people are overwhelmingly more likely per police interaction to get the shit kicked out of them by the police. That's true. Like, the data supports that conclusion. Black people are more likely to be beat by police officers, but they make up 27% of police interactions, and they make up 26% of police fatalities. They're technically within the margin of error. They might actually be statistically underrepresented, but we're not allowed, but we can't bring up certain FBI statistics on Twitch because that's a terrible thing to just report.
Yeah, you can't talk about facts.
Right?
You can't talk about facts.
Yeah, certain facts are, what did Ben Shapiro used to call them years ago? Hate facts, I think is what he used to call them.
Yeah.
It's a funny little thing. I mean, Ben Shapiro's, he's had a couple of dubs. But yeah, you know what I mean? Like, the George Floyd thing was such an interesting thing, I think, because it was one of the few instances where like nearly every conservative in the beginning was like, yeah, fuck those cops. Right? Like, even like they were like, maybe it was the training and we should talk about that. But they were like, clearly there is a problem here. That is not how you would hold someone. And then additional evidence came out and it was like, oh, the guy was screaming to get out of the car, begging to be put on the ground, begging to be taken out of the police vehicle. Oh, he might have overdosed on fentanyl. Then his criminal record shortly came after, and it's like, oh, this guy held a gun to pregnant women's bellies as his friends robbed the house. The world is a better place with George Floyd dead, right? Like, there's no argument there. Like, there was it's just no argument that like the world is a better place with that kind of piece of shit.
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that. That's just me.
I mean, like, yeah, maybe he has some redemption arc in the future and like can, make up for all of the crimes that he committed. But I'm pretty sure restitution for those crimes would have demanded his life. But regardless,
how could you possibly be in favor of the death penalty if you're a anarchist, libertarian, or whatever?
I'm not in favor of the death penalty.
Oh, okay.
I just don't think you can logically argue against the death penalty being exerted over you if you kill someone. Yeah. You're stopped from being able to argue it because, like, you demand restitution to the victims of the crimes. If you murder someone, right? How do you pay that restitution? Well, you can't pay that restitution, and therefore you can't argue logically that you are that you believe in the non-aggression principle or that the non-aggression principle should apply to you. So it's not so much that like anybody else has the right to kill you, but the family can kill you without any recourse because you can't argue the non-aggression principle be applied to you. Now, if you wrongfully kill that person, right, and it turns out they weren't that murderer, right, well then their family can murder you, and now you get into this Hatfield-McCoy type situation. And so I don't think it is practical, nor is it something I personally find morally good to advocate for. So if I was living in my own society, I would prefer to live in a society where the death penalty doesn't exist. That's my full answer.
Hey, we've been going for over an hour and 15 minutes here, so I'm gonna let you go. But I enjoyed the conversation. I'd be down to chat again sometime about other stuff too, if you want. Yeah.
I do long streams because we do this all the time. So check out LCTRFan. Do you have a YouTube?
Yeah, I do. Yep, I'm lecture fan on every social media platform. LCTRFan on every single platform. You can find me there. And awesome. everybody in my chat
Fabian
knows
Liberty everywhere,
Liberty.
Except Twitter, where I'm Liberty_Fabian. But if you just Google Fabian Liberty, if you just search for Fabian Liberty on Twitter, you'll find me.
Oh man, thanks so much for the invite.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks for talking. We'll chat later.
Absolutely. You just watched a clip from our Twitch channel, Fabian Liberty. If you like content like this, please like and subscribe here on YouTube, or go ahead and give us a follow on twitch.tv/Fabian Liberty.